The lock clicked at exactly 11:02 p.m. Officer Raymond knew because he always looked at his watch when the final door shut behind him. It was part habit, part ritual, a small gesture to tell himself the night shift had officially ended. The old orphanage, abandoned for nearly 3 decades, wasn't supposed to be this quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears like thick cotton. No creaks, no wind, no rats even. Just the emptiness of a place forgotten by time. He turned away from the gate, flicking off his flashlight, and took 3 steps before something stopped him. A sound. It wasn't loud, nor sudden. It was almost ... rhythmic, like a soft thump, a pattern. Almost like, no, that was impossible. He turned back toward the building, eyes scanning the second-floor windows. Nothing, just moonlight spilling across broken panes and peeling wallpaper. Maybe it was his nerves. Maybe the building was settling. Maybe the cold was making the wooden beams expand. He'd heard all the theories. He even believed them. Until that night. Because when he returned the next morning, just to calm his own curiosity, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. The door to the nursery was ajar. Just slightly. Just enough. And on the far wall, above the final crib, the one that had always been empty, even in the old records, someone had written a name. Not scratched, not scrawled. Written neatly, in chalk so white it could only have been fresh. He stepped closer, heart pounding in his throat. The name read, Eleanor. He didn't know an Eleanor. No one had mentioned her. She wasn't on the files. And then he saw it. Inside the crib, tucked beneath a rotting blanket, was a small stuffed rabbit. One ear torn, the other stitched with red thread. A rabbit no one had seen since the building was condemned. Raymond reached for it. And that's when the door slammed shut behind him. Locked from the outside. The lights were never supposed to work again. Raymond stumbled backward, heart racing, as the echo of the slamming door rang through the empty hallway. His flashlight flickered violently before dying with a pop, plunging the nursery into a sudden, suffocating darkness. His first instinct was to reach for the knob and twist, but it wouldn't budge. He jiggled it once, twice, nothing. It was sealed tight as if welded shut by unseen hands. He pressed his ear to the door, hoping for footsteps, voices, anything that would indicate anyone was outside. But there was only silence. Not even the hum of wind between broken window panes or the distant rattle of pipes. Just a thick, unmoving quiet. The kind that made every breath feel louder than it should be. The nursery itself was small, barely enough for 3 cribs when it operated. The paint on the walls had curled into strips, some dangling like forgotten party streamers. The air smelled of old wood, mildew, and something else, something faintly metallic. Raymond's eyes adjusted slowly, aided only by the thin moonlight slipping through the fractured glass. And that's when he saw it. The light above the crib labeled Eleanor began to glow. Faint at first, then stronger. He blinked. The building hadn't had electricity in 30 years. He stepped toward it, boots creaking over warped floorboards. Each footfall echoed as if the room were stretching farther with every step. He stopped in front of the crib, eyes fixated on the old bulb hanging above it, now casting a warm, almost golden hue over the stuffed rabbit. The toy hadn't moved, but it looked different, cleaner, less decayed. He leaned in. The torn ear was still there, but the stitching, the red thread was brighter, newer. He extended his hand, fingers trembling. The second his fingertips brushed the rabbit's fur, the light above him flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. The air shifted. A soft breeze drifted across the room. Impossible. The windows were shut. He turned slowly toward the far wall, where peeling wallpaper revealed old mural sunflowers, smiling suns, bluebirds mid-flight. At the center of the mural, a tree stood painted from floor to ceiling, its branches spreading outward like veins. Except now, something was carved into the trunk of the tree. He approached it slowly, every instinct screaming that he shouldn't. 3 letters, deep, precise. N. They hadn't been there when he entered the room. Raymond reached out to trace the carving and stopped. A whisper, low and stretched, filled the space around him. Find her. The rabbit dropped from the crib to the floor with a soft thud. He spun around nobody. The light above the crib shattered. Darkness returned. She was never on the records. Raymond's heart was still thudding against his ribs as he pushed open the thick leather-bound ledger he'd found in the main office. The orphanage's dusty filing room had been overtaken by mildew and collapse, the ceiling half caved in, the cabinets rusted shut. But this one had been untouched, perfectly placed at the center of a mahogany desk that shouldn't have still been standing. He scanned through brittle pages, eyes flicking across columns of handwritten names. Date of birth, intake form, assigned caregiver. Dozens of children passed through these halls in the 60s and 70s, each with their own line, their own place in this forgotten system. But no Eleanor. Not a single Eleanor H. anywhere in the years he searched. Not in admissions. Not in adoptions. Not even among the deceased. He flipped back and forth, pacing the room as if movement could loosen some answer hidden between the pages. The musty air made his throat tighten. He looked again at the carved letters in his notebook. M. He thought back to the mural. Those initials weren't etched carelessly. They were placed with care, purposefully aligned with the painted bark, almost like a marker, a memorial, or worse, an anchor. Outside the office, the hallway stretched longer than he remembered. His footsteps echoed sharply against the cold tile, the same way they had when he was a child running through these halls. The orphanage had been shut down the year after he left, sealed up due to maintenance failures and a mysterious fire in the south wing. No one ever spoke about the real reason. Raymond reached the old admissions room. Its double doors groaned open with a breath of stale, forgotten air. The room was a graveyard of file cabinets. But at the back, one drawer stood slightly open. He approached, heart-thumping, and pulled it fully. Inside, a single manila envelope, yellowed by time, marked Archive Unsorted. He opened it with trembling fingers. A black and white photo slipped out. A girl in a white dress stood by the orphanage's playroom wall, clutching the same rabbit Raymond had seen in the crib. Her eyes stared directly into the camera, unblinking, too mature for a child. On the back of the photo, written in neat cursive, Eleanor May Hartley, April 12, 1972. His pulse quickened. He flipped through the rest of the envelope. No forms, no birth certificate, no caregiver assignment, just the photo. And a single page typed. Eleanor is not to be listed among residents. If questioned, deny knowledge. If seen, report directly to Father Callahan. Raymond's breath caught. Father Callahan had vanished after the fire. No one knew why he left or where he went. As Raymond lowered the page, the overhead lights in the admissions room buzzed, then hummed to life. Every bulb flickered on, the same way the crib light had. Then the intercom above the door crackled. Static, then a voice. Young, feminine. Raymond, you came back. He stumbled back. The intercom hadn't worked in decades. He looked around, no one. But he felt it. She was here. She had always been here. The playroom still had toys that weren't dusty. Raymond knew the voice couldn't have been real. He told himself it was just residual static, an echo of some old recording trapped in rusted wires, or perhaps the wind teasing his senses. But deep down, where logic couldn't reach, he knew better. That voice didn't come from a recording. It had said his name. The narrow hallway beyond admissions curved slightly, leading to the east wing, the wing that had burned, the wing that was supposed to be boarded up. Yet now, as he approached it, he saw the caution tape ripped clean, as if someone had walked straight through it just moments before. The air turned thicker. The smell of soot, old ash, and something sweeter like rotting flowers crept in. He paused at the archway leading into the playroom. The door was ajar. Not shattered, not melted, just open. The same colored handprints from decades ago still decorated the walls. His had once been up there too. He remembered being 7, giggling with one of the older girls as they dipped their palms in green paint. Her name was Mandy. She'd been adopted just before the fire. He wondered if she remembered this place like he did. Pushing the door gently, it opened with a low groan that echoed across the room. He stepped in and immediately stopped. Half the toys were covered in thick layers of dust, the kind that only forms after years of abandonment. But in the far right corner, near the large cracked window, sat a tea set. Porcelain cups, tiny saucers, a chipped teapot, and no dust. 2 of the cups were filled with water. Real water, not moldy or stagnant. Crystal clear, as if someone had poured it that morning. The tiny chairs around the table were set neatly, and next to one of them was a rabbit. The same rabbit from the crib and from the photograph. Raymond's stomach twisted. He approached slowly, every step weighted with dread and confusion. As he got closer, he noticed something even more disturbing. One of the cups had lipstick on the rim, red, fresh. He reached out, trembling, and touched the rabbit's fur. It was warm. A gust of wind slammed the door shut behind him. He spun, heart hammering in his throat, but no one was there, only silence. Then the tape player on the shelf sparked to life. Click, a lullaby began to play. A tune he hadn't heard in 30 years. He remembered it clearly. Eleanor used to hum it, not out loud, but under her breath, barely audible, whenever she was alone in the corner with that rabbit. No one else seemed to hear her. No one else ever acknowledged her. But Raymond had always noticed. She had never spoken to him, never made eye contact. But now, here in this abandoned room, her lullaby played as if on command. Raymond took a seat at the tea table, unsure why he did it, only knowing that something compelled him to. The air around him seemed to pulse, not with cold, but with attention. Something unseen was watching him. He looked across the table and froze. A third cup was no longer empty. Steam rose from the porcelain. The smell of chamomile filled the room. The chair across from him slowly shifted, as if someone had just sat down. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused. Then the teapot tilted on its own. Tea poured neatly into his cup. He was being welcomed. A child's voice, barely a whisper, echoed beside his ear. "Don't leave yet, Raymond. We haven't played our game." Every hair on his body stood on end. And for the first time since returning, Raymond realized this wasn't just about closure or memories. This was about unfinished business. About someone or something that had waited for him. And it wasn't ready to let go. Her drawing was still on the wall, but the crayon was missing. The moment Raymond left the playroom, the corridor behind him fell into silence again, as if that small pocket of time and space had folded shut. But the presence followed, not in footsteps or shadows, but in the pressure behind his ribs, like breath that never fully escaped. He paused to collect himself near the staircase, the metal railing still warped from the fire, though the flames had never quite reached this side of the building. That detail had always puzzled the investigators. He turned left into what used to be the art room. When they still had funding, this space had been filled with easels, canvases, and plastic drawers bursting with supplies. The walls had once been a mosaic of color and chaos, finger paint masterpieces, sunbursts, trees, faces with too many eyes. But now, most of it had crumbled away. Paint peeled like shedding skin. Drawers hung open and empty. And yet, above the tiled sink in the far left corner, one drawing remained. He didn't need to get close to recognize it. A girl, alone under a tree, a rabbit in her arms. Her face half finished. Just lines, no eyes. Her name was written in shaky crayon letters at the bottom right corner. Eleanor. She'd drawn it the week before the fire. He remembered because he had been sitting beside her that day, scribbling a lopsided spaceship. She hadn't spoken, just hummed that lullaby under her breath, occasionally looking up as if waiting for someone else to finish the drawing for her. That sketch had been pinned up high, out of reach, and it had survived the years. But something about it now looked different. The red crayon line that outlined her figure was thinner than before. He moved closer, squinting at the paper. The red line ended abruptly at her neck, unfinished. And beneath the drawing, sitting on the edge of the metal sink, was the empty paper wrapper of a crayon. He reached for it, but it crumbled into dust. The scent hit him then. Wax and iron, blood and something burnt. He turned. The door had closed behind him, but this time he wasn't alone. In the center of the room stood a girl. Her back turned, arms swaying gently as if listening to a melody only she could hear. Her dress was the same pale blue from the photograph in the main office. Dirt-stained, wrinkled, her bare feet silent on the tiles. And in her left hand, a crayon. Red. Raymond wanted to speak, but the air thickened in his throat like smoke. She raised the crayon to the wall, not the paper, but the cracked plaster beneath, and began to draw. Her movements were slow, deliberate. A circle, 2 dots, a curve, a face, but not hers, his. The sketch was unmistakable. She was drawing Raymond's face, and beneath it, she began to write in that same trembling hand. R-A-Y. He backed away, stumbling against a fallen shelf. The crash echoed like thunder. The girl didn't flinch. She kept writing. M-O-N-D. The entire wall began to darken. Not just around her sketch, but pulsing outward, like water soaking into paper. It spread in veins and webs, forming the silhouette of the orphanage itself, black against the fading beige wall. A new image was forming. The night of the fire, windows blazing, figures fleeing, but one stayed behind. A child standing still in the doorway, holding a rabbit. Raymond shook his head, unwilling to believe what he was seeing. But his younger self was in the image now, running, looking back, and that girl not escaping, being left behind. The real Eleanor turned to face him. Her eyes were hollow, like shadows carved from memory. "You forgot me," she whispered. He stumbled toward the door, yanking the handle. Locked. The temperature plummeted. Frost bloomed on the windows. The air tasted of ash and regret. And behind him, the crayon snapped in two. That sound echoed louder than it should have. When he turned again, the girl was gone. Only the wall remained, and his name, etched forever in red. A shiver ran through him. This place wasn't haunted in the way the world thought. It was remembering. The records room had a file that shouldn't exist. Raymond fled the art room, heart hammering against his ribs like a fist on a locked door. The hallway outside looked unchanged, but his perception had shifted. The air felt heavier, soaked in memories that had never truly settled. He moved fast, feet echoing across the floor tiles as dust stirred in his wake. He didn't stop until he reached the far end of the west wing, where a heavy metal door bore the sign, "Archives Staff Only." This part of the orphanage had been off limits to the children. Raymond had only ever entered once, when Sister Judith forgot to lock it, and he'd gone searching for extra chalk. Back then, it had felt like a forbidden treasure trove. Rows of wooden file cabinets, metal shelves packed with boxes, the scent of mildew and old paper clinging to every surface. Now, the door creaked open without resistance. Inside, the dust lay thick, undisturbed for years. Shafts of moonlight from a broken window cast long lines across the floor. The silence here wasn't just absence of sound. It was a pressure, a warning. He stepped in, letting the door fall shut behind him. As it clicked, something stirred, not a sound, but a feeling in the marrow of his bones. As if the building had just acknowledged him. He moved toward the back shelf, scanning labels. The files were arranged chronologically by admission date: 1983, 1984, 1985. He moved down the aisle. There, 1993. He flipped through the folders, his fingers trembling. Each file was a life: photographs, evaluations, notes from social workers. Names he remembered: Lucas, Mariah, Elena. And then tucked tightly between two others, one slim yellowed folder caught his eye. Eleanor Bennett. He pulled it out. The folder was lighter than the others, barely a few pages inside. He opened it slowly. No photo, no fingerprints. Just a typewritten page, admission form. But something was wrong. Her date of birth was listed as 1987, but Raymond remembered she was younger than him by at least 2 years. The admitting party was listed as private guardian, no name, no signature. Under reason for admission, it simply read, placement pending. No follow-up evaluations, no progress reports. The file stopped abruptly, as if her presence had been an afterthought. Then he noticed the second sheet tucked behind it. It was a letter, dated 2 weeks after the fire. To whom it may concern, subject Eleanor. Bennett has been officially removed from all state records due to failure to confirm existence. Discrepancy noted. Proceed with erasure protocol. No signature, no agency header. Nothing but that phrase. Failure to confirm existence. Raymond read it again, and again. Eleanor had lived there. He remembered her face, her laugh. That song she always hummed. She had drawn pictures, shared meals. She was as real as the others, more so. So why was she being erased? A scraping sound echoed behind him. He froze. Another cabinet drawer had opened, by itself. He turned slowly, his breath hitching. The drawer held a single folder, black, no label. Drawn to it, he crossed the room and lifted it carefully. Inside, a single page. A sketch, crayon, red, the same line work, the same trembling hand. It was him, again, sleeping, a shadow behind his bed. The same image Eleanor had drawn in the art room, but this time the shadow had eyes, and a hand reaching for his chest. Below the sketch, scrawled in red, "You dreamt of me." His vision blurred. He blinked hard, heart pounding. That wasn't a drawing from the past. It was new, fresh, made after he'd returned. He shoved the folders back into place, adrenaline taking over. He needed to leave, now. But as he turned toward the door, the lights flickered once, twice. Then all at once, the room lit up, not with electricity, but as if sunlight had burst through every crack. And standing in front of the exit was Sister Judith. Only not as he remembered. She was younger. Her habit perfectly ironed, her hands clasped, but her eyes were wrong. Too wide, too still. "You were always curious," she said softly. "That's what made you dangerous." He opened his mouth, but no sound came. She stepped closer. Her feet didn't make a sound on the floor. She wasn't supposed to be seen. Raymond took a step back. "What do you mean?" he rasped. She was placed here, not for care, for containment. A pause. Her expression soft, like pity wrapped in regret. "You opened the wrong file. The temperature dropped again. Papers began to flutter off the shelves. The drawer slammed shut. She's awake now. The light vanished. And Raymond was alone, but not unseen. She drew the same crib in every picture. Raymond's legs carried him down the east corridor before he even realized he was running. The darkness folded around him like a curtain as he passed room after room, his breath shallow, each step echoing like a war drum. His mind couldn't shake the letter. Failure to confirm existence. What did that mean? How could someone so vividly present be erased from every record, every memory not tied to him? He stopped outside the old recreation room. The door was slightly ajar. That room had been Eleanor's favorite. She would sit at the corner table near the far window, crayons scattered, tongue poked between her teeth as she drew. She never played board games with the others. She drew, always. Something compelled him to enter. The air shifted when he stepped in, colder than the rest of the orphanage, as if sealed tight for years. Dust floated like snowflakes in the beam of his flashlight. The scent of old glue, crayon wax, and childhood still clung to the walls. He walked slowly toward the back corner. There it was, the table. On it, scattered like she had just left them, were her drawings. Raymond froze. Dozens of pages, all freshly placed. He reached for the top one. The paper was thick, stained at the corners, the crayon still leaving flakes. The image showed a row of cribs, identical, but one had a nameplate. Eleanor had written in shaky red letters, Isabel. The next drawing, another crib, the same angle, same name, and the next, and the next. All of them. Variations of the same image. Always the same crib. Always that name, Isabel. He didn't remember any girl named Isabel. Not then. Not after. He kept flipping. More cribs. Some burned. Some with black stick figure shadows looming beside them. Some with red scrawls over the crib bars. Not words, just frantic loops and spirals, as if something had tried to claw its way off the page. The last drawing stopped him cold. This one was different. It wasn't just crayon. It had smears. Real ones. In the picture, a man stood at the foot of the crib. Raymond recognized himself instantly. His posture, his hair, his clothes. The version of himself drawn in the picture was from now, from tonight. And in the crib, written in bold letters, was his own name. He dropped the page. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. His heart thudded as his thoughts raced. Why would Eleanor draw that? Was it even her? Was someone placing these now, as he moved through the building? But how? No one else was here. No one could be. He turned back toward the door, and that's when he saw it. The mirror. He hadn't remembered a mirror in this room, but there it stood, tall and framed in dark wood, at the far wall. He moved toward it, slowly, drawn by a force he couldn't name. His reflection looked normal, disheveled, pale, eyes wide. But behind him, in the mirror, just in the reflection, the table was no longer empty. A girl sat there, braided hair, small hands holding a red crayon, drawing. He spun around. Nothing. The table was bare again. Papers scattered on the floor. He turned back to the mirror. She was still there. And this time, she looked up, directly at him. Her eyes weren't empty. They were pleading. He stepped closer. "Eleanor?" he whispered. She didn't move her lips. But in the mirror, the crayon did. It traced another name. Not Eleanor, not Isabel. A third one. A name he hadn't thought about in decades. Margot, his sister. Raymond staggered back, breath caught in his chest. Margot had only lived a week after being born. His mother never spoke of it again. He had buried the memory. How could Eleanor have known that name? He stepped forward again, furious now. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cracking in the stillness. In the mirror, the girl tilted her head. The walls and the reflection changed. The crib disappeared. Behind her, the hallway emerged, the basement door. Then a flicker. A figure in the shadows behind the girl. Tall, gaunt, arms too long, fingers curling like hooks. The light in the room dimmed. The reflection vanished. Only Raymond stared back now. The mirror was just a mirror. But he felt watched. Not by Eleanor. Not by Isabel. Not even by whatever had drawn those pictures. By the thing behind it all. The thing that used them like puppets. Used memories like naps. And used children like keys. Raymond turned and fled. But even as he ran, one image burned into his mind like fire. The nameplate on the last crib. This time, it didn't say Isabel. It said his full name. And the date carved beneath it wasn't from the past. It was tomorrow. The dollhouse was never in the blueprints. Raymond stood at the edge of the third-floor hallway, heart hammering as he stared at a door that hadn't existed before. He had walked this corridor 1,000 times. He knew every creaky board, every crooked nail, every faded plaque. And yet, this door, small, wooden, almost childlike in design, was entirely new. It hadn't been here yesterday. It hadn't been here an hour ago. But there it stood, wedged between the former sewing room and the linen closet. No number. Just a brass knob and a sense of pressure behind it, like something was waiting. The hallway around him fell silent. Even the night breeze that rattled the window panes had hushed. He reached for the handle. It was warm. The door creaked open. The room inside was lit with a soft, amber glow. No bulbs, no switches. The light seemed to come from the walls themselves. Raymond stepped in slowly, half expecting the floor to vanish beneath him. What he saw stopped him cold. A dollhouse. No, the dollhouse. He remembered it from the day he arrived as a boy. Back then, it had sat in the center of the nursery, surrounded by curious hands and giggles. But at some point, it had disappeared. Staff said it was thrown out. Termites. Broken pieces. Unsafe. He hadn't thought of it in decades. Yet here it was. Pristine. He moved closer. It was enormous, almost chest height, made of thick oak and carved with unsettling precision. The paint was worn but elegant. Deep burgundy walls, black shutters, roof tiles, hand-painted in meticulous detail. Each window had miniature curtains. The front door even had a doormat, too small for any real foot. Raymond knelt before it. Inside the rooms were fully furnished tiny couches, grandfather clocks, china cabinets. It was a perfect replica of the orphanage itself. Each floor mirrored the real layout. The dining hall, the laundry, the east wing, the basement stairwell. He squinted closer. On the top floor, in one room, sat a crib. His fingers trembled as he reached toward it. Inside the crib lay a wooden figure. Not quite a doll, too rough, too rushed. And its face, it bore no features. Just the vague outline of a head and body, but something about its posture. The way its arms curled at its sides. It reminded him of the drawings. Of the crib Eleanor always drew. He leaned in closer. There were other figures now, one in the hallway, another near the stairs, another outside the front door. As he watched, one of them moved, just slightly, a head tilt. Or maybe just a trick of the light. Then, from the corner of his eye, something else. A shape. Outside the miniature window. He blinked. Gone. Raymond rose to his feet and turned to leave. But the door was no longer there. Just a solid wall. He ran to it, pressing his hands against the wood, searching for seams. Nothing. The light dimmed. A whisper passed through the room. Not in words, in breath. A sound that seemed to crawl into his ears and press against the back of his skull. He turned back to the dollhouse. It had changed. Now the figure in the hallway was larger, its arms outstretched, and the one outside the house was at the front door, hand raised as if about to knock. Then came the sound. 3 knocks, not from the dollhouse. From behind him, Raymond spun around. No one. Another knock. He turned back to the miniature front door. The tiny figure had vanished. He staggered back, knocking over a small chair behind him. His flashlight flickered. The walls around him shifted again. He could feel it more than see it, as if the room were folding, shrinking. He stumbled toward the wall where the door had once been, pounding with both fists. "Let me out," he shouted. The floor tilted slightly, not enough to fall, just enough to suggest that the room had become aware of him, that it was watching. The dollhouse was now closed, its tiny front door shut. He blinked. The light returned, and the real door, his door, was back. He didn't hesitate. He lunged, yanked it open, and hurled himself into the hallway beyond. The corridor was still, quiet. Dust swirled in the flashlight beam. He slammed the door shut behind him. But before he could turn away, his eyes dropped to the floor. A tiny doormat at his feet. He knelt. Written on it in minuscule letters, barely carved, "Welcome home, Raymond." Eleanor's files were hidden in the furnace room. Raymond didn't sleep that night. Even with the orphanage quiet again and the strange room gone, he lay awake in the small cot he'd set up in the office, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced, trying to stitch together the experiences of the past few days. The dollhouse, the sealed hallway, Eleanor's name scrawled in places it should not have been. And now something was moving through the building with intent, not just memory. He felt it in the way the walls seemed to breathe, in how every creak of the floorboards carried a message just out of reach. At dawn, he made coffee, though the warmth did little to settle his nerves. He stood by the office window, watching mist creep over the overgrown courtyard. A gust of wind rattled the glass, and something sharp tapped the pane. He leaned in. A feather, pressed flat against the window, trapped by the wind. But not just any feather. It shimmered, not with iridescence, but with ash gray and fine, like the remains of something long burned. He turned away, heart thudding, and his eyes landed on the blueprint of the orphanage tacked to the wall. There, near the bottom furnace room. He remembered now. It had been bricked over decades ago, when the orphanage updated its heating system. No one went down there anymore. No one could. The stairs had collapsed in the 70s. And yet, a whisper in the back of his mind nudged him. That's where the fire started. Not the literal one. The other fire. The kind that consumes secrets. He dressed quickly, flashlight in hand, and made his way down the east wing. Dust choked the air. His steps echoed as he descended into the oldest part of the building, where time had frozen. The walls were stained with soot, the light fixtures broken and hanging like dead vines. At the far end of the hallway, the entrance to the furnace room stood bricked up, just as he remembered. But there, at the base, a hole, not big enough for an adult, but something had pushed through. The bricks were scorched black at the edges, as if someone or something had burned its way out. Raymond knelt. Cold air poured from the opening, too cold for spring. And beneath it, a trail ash and tiny footprints. Not shoes. Bare feet. Children's feet. He took a crowbar from the nearby maintenance closet and began prying the bricks free, one by one. The wall groaned in protest, but he kept going, coughing through the dust. After nearly an hour, a gap wide enough for him to crawl through emerged. He hesitated only a second, then slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of cinders and mildew. The walls were lined with old metal piping and rusted grates. The furnace itself stood like a tomb, massive and long dormant, its doors open as if exhaling secrets. But it wasn't the furnace that drew his eyes. It was the cabinet beside it, old, padlocked. He smashed the lock with a crowbar. Inside, papers. Files yellowed and brittle, their edges curled with age. He reached in, hands shaking. The first folder was marked Eleanor M. He opened it. Birth certificate. But something was off. The date of birth was crossed out. Rewritten in a different hand. Not once, 3 times. Each with a different year. Each scribbled over with a note. Incorrect intake. He flipped through more pages. Medical records. Incident reports. A staff note dated 1966. Child speaks of events not yet occurred. Exhibits knowledge of staff movements before they happen. Drawings mirror architecture not present in this building. Another note, this one unsigned. Removed from nursery following disappearance of D. Langston. Claims he walked into the walls. Witnesses unverified. His breath caught. D. Langston had been a janitor. He was reported missing in 1966. Never found. Raymond continued flipping. At the bottom of the folder, a drawing. Eleanor's signature scribble. Crayons waxy and vibrant. It depicted the orphanage, on fire. But in the flames were faces. And in the doorway, a child, alone, holding a match. The figure had no features, but the name written beneath in clumsy block letters was unmistakable. Raym, his own name. He dropped the folder. The cabinet behind him creaked. Slowly. He turned. Empty, but a shadow passed across the far wall, not cast by him. He backed toward the opening, grabbing the folder, and crawled out. As he stood in the hallway again, light streaming in from the cracked window above, he noticed something on his sleeve. Soot and a tiny handprint. Too small for an adult. Too deliberate to be an accident. He walked back upstairs, each step heavier. He now had proof. Proof Eleanor had never been just another orphan. She had seen something, known something, and somehow he was part of it. But how? And why was his name in a child's drawing of a fire that never happened? Or hadn't happened yet? The attic had no door until today. Raymond spent most of the morning scanning Eleanor's file over and over again, as if each read might make it make sense. But it didn't. What bothered him most wasn't the strange entries or the prophetic drawings. It was the date at the bottom of one of the reports dated 2 years before he was born. And yet the name Raym was written in a child's scrawl, unmistakably referring to him. It was impossible. Unless it wasn't. He hadn't told anyone about the fire yet. There was no one to tell. And that realization made him feel both alone and, oddly, safe. But the safety was temporary, because something in the building was waking up. Something that had been asleep for decades. Just after noon, the power flickered. Once, twice, then held steady. He went to check the breaker box in the basement normal. But as he returned to the first floor, the hallway felt different. Longer, off-kilter, like it was leaning slightly, though the floor remained level. He walked slowly, hand brushing the wall, and then he saw it. A door, not on either side, above him. In the ceiling, a pull-down attic ladder. But the orphanage didn't have an attic. He'd been through the blueprints 100 times. There was no space above the 3rd floor, just the roof. He stared up at the wooden hatch. It was new. No dust, no cobwebs. The handle glinted like polished brass. Raymond's skin crawled. Still, he reached up, pulling the string. The ladder descended silently, almost eagerly. The air that followed it was wrung too dry, like it had been sealed in for a long time. It smelled faintly of chalk and lilacs. He climbed. Each rung moaned beneath his weight, but held. At the top, he pushed open the hatch and poked his head through. The space was massive, way too large for what the building should have allowed. It stretched in all directions, with no windows, no visible supports. Just an endless floor of worn wood planks and pale, white light with no source. Scattered across the attic were objects, not furniture, not junk, memories. He saw them like exhibits in a museum. A blue ribbon, tattered and curled at the edges. A rusted lunchbox with the name Calvin scratched into the lid. A broken teacup with dried petals inside. Each item radiated something: presence, pain, memory. He walked slowly, careful not to touch anything, until he reached the center. There, on a pedestal made of what looked like bone-white wood, sat a box, small, velvet, locked. He reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the lid, the entire attic breathed. The walls shuddered. The floor rippled like water beneath him. And suddenly, he was not alone. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Soft, mere, children's feet again, but not playful. They circled him. He couldn't see them, just their shadows cast on the walls, impossibly tall and flickering like flame. One stepped forward. A girl, hair long and dark, nightgown stained with ash. She didn't speak, just looked at him, tilting her head. Then, slowly, she reached into the box and pulled out a photo of him as a child, standing outside this very building. Only he'd never been here before taking over. He was sure of it, wasn't he? He stared at the photo, confused, then noticed the date on the back. 1987. He would have been 6. He turned back to the girl, but she was gone. So were the shadows. The attic was quiet again. He climbed down, photo in hand, and closed the hatch. When he looked up, there was no door anymore, just ceiling, as if it had never been there. He ran to the office, pulled out the orphanage enrollment records from the 1980s, flipped quickly, found it. There, Raymond M., age 6, admitted June 3rd, 1987. Discharged. No record. His hands trembled. The walls whispered, and in the silence, he finally understood. He hadn't inherited this place. He had returned. The room they never cleaned still smelled like ash. Raymond barely slept that night. He sat at his desk, the photo trembling in his fingers, rereading the name and date again and again, trying to disprove his own existence on the page. But the ink never faded. The truth never shifted. According to the orphanage's own records, he had been here. He had been one of them. But how? His earliest memories were of a foster home in Illinois. Clean, sterile, loveless, but orderly. Not this place. Not cracked walls and haunted stairs. Not whispering shadows and breathing attics. Unless those memories had been given to him, planted, rewritten. Unless those memories weren't his. Morning came too soon. The air felt heavier, and the cold no longer came from the outside. It pressed against him from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, seeping through his bones. The orphanage was remembering him, pulling him back into something he didn't understand. Still gripping the photograph, he forced himself to move. There was one wing of the building he hadn't yet explored fully, the east corridor. Sealed since the 90s after a partial roof collapse, but the weather had shifted. The warnings from the walls were different now. They weren't trying to scare him off. They were guiding him. He walked the east corridor slowly. Every step echoed like it was happening in a different time. The hallway was colder here, and the rot on the wallpaper seemed frozen in place, trapped in a moment that refused to decay fully. At the end was a door, painted over dozens of times, peeling layers, revealing colors from every era. A brass plate above it read simply, Room 3D. He had never seen it listed on any blueprint or staff report. The doorknob was rusted, but it turned easily. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ash and something older damp fabric, rotting wood, and a faint trace of violets. Dust motes hung still in the air, refusing to dance in the beam of his flashlight. The room had no windows, no furniture, just blackened walls and a floor covered in soot. And in the far corner, a single crib, charred, melted in places, but still standing, and above it, etched into the wall, a name. Eleanor. He stepped closer. The ashes on the floor didn't crunch, they whispered. Tiny, papery voices clinging to his ankles as he crossed the room. When he reached the crib, he saw something inside. A small cloth doll, face burned away, but the body intact. Its arms outstretched toward him. He didn't want to pick it up. He shouldn't have picked it up, but he did. The moment his fingers touched the fabric, the room pulsed. The lights died, the air shifted, and the door slammed shut behind him. Pitch black. Breathing returned. Not his, not alone. A voice whispered in his ear, cold as frost and impossibly close. She never left. He turned quickly. Nothing. Then the room lit itself, not with bulbs, but with flame. Not real fire. Memories of it. The walls burned with silent flickers. And in those flames, shadows moved. Children. Watching. Waiting. One stepped forward. The girl again. Eleanor. She pointed to the crib. Raymond turned. And suddenly he was a child again. Kneeling. Crying. In the flames. He remembered. Not the fire. The scream. His scream. He had been here. He had run. He had left them. Left her. He fell backward, hitting the wall hard, the soot clinging to his hands like blood. The fire flickered out. The lights returned. But the crib was gone, and the walls were clean, as if no one had ever burned here, as if the room had never existed. He stumbled out into the hallway, ash still on his palms, heart racing. Down the corridor, back to the office. He had to know more, had to remember everything. But when he reached his desk, the photo was gone, and in its place, a new one. Same boy, same face. But now, two children stood beside him. A girl with long dark hair, a boy with a broken arm, both staring straight into the camera. Beneath the photo, written in faded ink, "They waited for you." The therapist who used to work here vanished too. The sky had turned a color he didn't recognize. Somewhere between blue and bruised, as if the heavens were holding their breath. Raymond sat in his car, photo in hand, engine off, silence all around. The new picture hadn't aged. The ink was fresh, the paper uncreased. Yet the people in it, they were wrong. The girl, the boy, they weren't random. They weren't strangers. He knew them now. Not from dreams. From flashes, moments, laughter shared in halls long gone. A hand grabbed during a lightning storm. Whispers traded beneath blankets. Memories not recalled, but restored. He had been one of them, and he had left them behind. But how could an entire chapter of his life vanish? He couldn't accept that he was losing his mind. Not anymore. There were too many coincidences, too many signs. He needed answers, not ghosts. So he drove to the city records office, a place where silence and dust did all the talking. But nothing turned up. The building had files on the orphanage construction permits, fire codes, a few complaints of strange noises and structural inconsistencies, but no full staff roster. No incident reports beyond 1995, and no record of Eleanor, except one. A name tucked into a referral form from 1993, faded typewritten letters. A mental health evaluation. It wasn't for a child. It was for a staff member, Dr. Elise Harrow, psychologist, contracted by the state to perform wellness assessments on staff. and checked the psychological stability of children under traumatic stress. But the document ended with a curious note. No contact since April 1994. Status unconfirmed. Presumed voluntary departure. Raymond's blood chilled. Unconfirmed, voluntary. Disappearance dressed as resignation. He wrote down the name. Traced it online. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No obituary. No forwarding practice. One old forum thread, buried beneath years of silence, mentioned her. A user named Sutais92 had posted, "My aunt used to work at Glen Willow Orphanage. Said the therapist there started acting weird after a girl died in a fire. Locked herself in a storage room for 3 days. When she came out, she said the building was alive. Then she vanished. No replies. No follow-up." Raymond screenshot the post. There had to be someone who knew more. Later that night, he returned to the orphanage. Because of course he did. Because the kind of story he was in didn't let people leave unfinished. The wind had picked up. Not loud, not angry, but insistent. Whispering through the cracked windows, like breath on a neck. He moved through the halls, flashlight trembling in his grip. He passed the office, the crib room, the sealed corridor, then stopped. There was a door that hadn't been there before. He knew this place like the lines of his own hand now. Every scab on the wall, every broken tile. But this door, this perfect white-painted door with brass hardware and a frosted window etched with Dr. Elise Harrow, child psychologist. It hadn't existed yesterday. He touched the doorknob. It was warm. And when he turned it, the smell hit him. Lavender and smoke. The office was pristine. Papers stacked. Books on trauma, grief, PTSD, aligned on shelves. A lamp glowed soft yellow. In the corner, an old tape recorder blinked, waiting. He pressed play, static. Then a voice, calm, measured, female. "This is Dr. Elise Harrow. Session number 36. Subject, Eleanor B. age, 6. Symptoms, night terrors, disassociation, spontaneous trances. New development. Eleanor insists the crib is not empty. She says it never was. She says someone still breathes in it at night. She calls it the hollow twin. I do not know what that means." Click. A pause. Session 37. Subject, self. Notes. The walls are thinner now. I hear them even when I am home. Something is remembering me. I can't sleep. I smell fire when there is no fire. Eleanor is gone, but I see her. Sometimes I think I am her. Click. Static. Then the final line whispered low. If someone finds this, don't open the crib. Don't answer it when it cries. Don't believe the building when it says it's sorry. The tape ejected itself. Raymond stepped back. Then he noticed the wall. Photos pinned like a therapist's attempt at understanding trauma. All of them dated between 1992 and 1994. Children. Dozens of them. Names handwritten below. Faces obscured in shadow or light flare. Except one. His own. Smiling. Standing in the playroom. Beside Eleanor. Behind them, a mirror. But in the reflection, only her. The mirror never lied. He didn't move. Couldn't. Not after what he saw. His own face smiling in the photo. Solid, real. Framed by childish innocence. And yet, in the reflection behind him, nothing, no silhouette, no faint blur. Just the girl. Alone, he took a step closer to the picture. Tried to dismiss it as an angle, a trick of light, a flawed exposure. But he knew. Deep down, he knew what it meant. He hadn't just forgotten this place. He had been erased from it. But the girl remembered. Eleanor had remembered him even when no one else did. Even when he had lived an entire life pretending none of this had ever happened. She had kept him alive in whispers, drawings, laughter buried beneath layers of ash and wallpaper. She had waited. For him. His breath caught in his throat as he turned from the photo wall. The office felt colder now. The lavender smell had soured, turning metallic like burnt iron. He backed out of the room slowly, pulling the door closed behind him. Only it wouldn't shut. A creak echoed from behind the desk, then a slow scraping. He flicked the flashlight toward the noise. The mirror. From the photo. It was leaning against the wall now, no longer in the background. It hadn't been there a second ago. His reflection wavered in it, distorted, wrong. His eyes were too dark, his smile too wide. Like the mirror knew something he didn't. Then the light flickered, and he saw her. Not behind him. Inside the mirror. Eleanor, smaller than he remembered. Fragile. Hair braided, wearing the same dress from the drawing he had found weeks ago. She didn't speak, didn't blink. Just raised a hand to the glass, palm open. He hesitated, then raised his own. Their fingers aligned, separated by decades and something far deeper than glass. Then she mouthed something. 3 words. Not help me, not get out, but you left again. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the edge of the desk. Memories slammed into him, screams, smoke, hands pulling him away, her voice calling out his name while flames devoured the crib room. He hadn't just survived. He had escaped, alone. They had told him the fire took the others. That he'd been lucky. That trauma could block things out. That amnesia was a mercy. But it wasn't amnesia. It was guilt. And now the house wanted him to remember. The mirror began to hum. A low vibration that made the walls groan. His reflection began to splinter, shards of him fracturing, showing versions of himself he didn't recognize. One with a bloody hand. One screaming. One crawling through fire with a burned child in his arms. He couldn't take it anymore. He turned and ran. Down the hall. Past the crib room, which now smelled distinctly like milk and soot. Past the stairwell, where handprints lined the wall in child-sized smears. Out through the front door that groaned like a mouth, forced open after decades shut. Back into the night. Back into silence. But even in the safety of his car, mirrorless and mundane, he felt it. Her eyes. Not angry. Not sad. Disappointed. She had waited for him twice, and twice he had run. He looked down at his hand. The fingertips tingled. On his palm, fogged like breath on glass, was a faint child's handprint. He hadn't just remembered the orphanage. It had remembered him. And it wasn't done. The basement wasn't just a room. Rain lashed the windshield as he drove, the wipers unable to keep up with the torrent. But it wasn't the storm outside that made his hands shake on the steering wheel. It was the storm within. Every flash of lightning seemed to illuminate the orphanage again in his mind. The crooked halls, the echo of lullabies twisted into cries, the mirror that didn't reflect truth, but memory. He didn't go home. He drove in circles for hours, haunted, searching for logic where none remained. But there was no peace in motion, no safety in denial. The house had shown him too much. Eleanor had told him too much. You left again. The words were seared into him now. They throbbed behind his eyes, thudded in his chest like a second heartbeat. By dawn, the storm had passed. And with it, his resistance. He turned the car around. The orphanage loomed just as broken as before, but now it breathed. Not literally, but in a way that made the air seem alive. Hungry. Expectant. He walked straight to the front doors, which swung open before he touched them. Inside, the house was different. Quieter. Not dead quiet watching quiet. He moved without hesitation now, no longer a stranger, but something in between a visitor and a returning ghost. He passed the mirror in the hallway. This time, it was covered with a white cloth. He didn't dare remove it. He descended the stairs. The basement door was already ajar. It was time. Each step down felt heavier. The air thickened, colder with every footfall. The light above flickered and died as he reached the last step. Only his flashlight remained, its beam cutting a weak path into the darkness. The basement wasn't just a room. It was a tomb, a vault of everything forgotten, buried, hidden. Toys rusted over with time, tiny shoes in a collapsed cubby, crib slats leaning against walls like bones. The smell was worse now, wet soil, mildew, burnt cotton. He swept the light slowly, the beam catching on the far wall. A mural. It had been painted long ago, then scrubbed out, repainted, destroyed again. But parts of it remained. A field of children playing beneath a golden sun. He recognized one. Himself. He walked toward the mural. The paint seemed wet. No, it was wet. Fresh brush strokes across his own face. Someone had been here recently, finishing it, restoring it. Behind him, a small bell rang. He froze. The kind of bell that hung on the end of a crib mobile. He turned and saw it. A crib, whole, untouched, resting in the center of the basement where there had been nothing just moments ago. His name carved into the headboard. Not painted, not labeled with paper or chalk. Carved, etched deep with something sharp. He stepped closer, heart pounding. Inside the crib, a bundle, blanket, white, still. He leaned in. The blanket rose. Something inside it breathed, not a baby. A figure, small, thin, eyes closed, then open. Eleanor, not as a child, not as a ghost, as something else, a fragment, a soul, a memory incarnate. She sat up slowly, eyes locking onto his, and for the first time, she spoke aloud. "You came back." He couldn't answer, could barely breathe. "You left, but I stayed, because the house needs one of us." He shook his head, backing away, but his feet refused to move. She pointed at the wall behind him. He turned. Another mural. This one, unfinished. A figure stood at the center, taller, older. It was him, with children around him, holding their hands, smiling, a caretaker. He spun back around. "I can't stay," he whispered. "I have a life." Eleanor only blinked. So did we. The walls groaned. The crib dissolved into ash, scattering like snow in slow motion. Her form began to fade with it. "You can leave," she said. "But the house will find you again." Or, the murals pulsed with light. "You can remember everything. And stay." He stumbled backward up the stairs. The house didn't stop him. At the top, he looked back one last time. The crib was gone. So was the mural. So was she. But the door didn't close. And the mirror at the end of the hallway? It showed him, standing in the basement, still holding her hand, still there. He slammed the door shut and ran into the morning light. But as he reached his car, he felt it in his pocket. A pacifier. Old, burnt at the edges, his name carved into the rubber. The letters were never meant to be read. The pacifier sat on the dashboard like a cursed relic, daring him to forget. But there was no forgetting anymore. Sleep became a stranger. In the dead hours of the night, he would jolt awake, sure that he heard the creak of a rocking chair or the soft chime of a mobile. Even the shadows in his home seemed unfamiliar now, as if they had followed him out of the orphanage and staked their claim in the corners of his reality. He stopped going to work, stopped answering messages. The world felt irrelevant compared to what he'd seen, what he'd remembered. Because in truth, it wasn't just about Eleanor. The house hadn't only shown him her pain. It had peeled back the layers of his own life, revealing cracks he didn't know were there. Forgotten moments, lost pieces. He began to suspect that his adoption papers had never told the full story. That maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been taken from that orphanage at all. Maybe he had never truly left it. One night, driven by a compulsion he didn't understand, he returned to the attic of his own home. Not because he kept anything important there, but because something pulled him. And when he opened the old steamer trunk buried beneath dust and cobwebs, he found them. Letters, dozens of them, some yellowed and brittle, others fresher, all sealed in envelopes with no return address, each one addressed to him. His full name, in a child's handwriting. He didn't remember writing them, but the handwriting was undeniably his. He opened the first. The paper crackled. "Dear me, I hope when you read this, you remember. Not the bad things, just the truth. We used to laugh in the sunroom. Do you remember the sunroom? Eleanor would sing. I would hum along. Then the cold came, and they stopped singing. His breath hitched. The second letter. They told us we were lucky, that no one wanted the ones who cried too much. But I think they were afraid. I think the crying was a sign. The house tried to warn them, but they didn't listen. So it warned us instead. Third letter. You always promised to protect her. You said we'd leave together, but you forgot. That's what the house does. It feeds on forgetting. But I didn't. I stayed. I remembered for both of us. Somewhere between the 10th and 11th letter, he realized the ink had changed. These weren't all written by him. Some were written to him. From Eleanor, from other children, from names he didn't recognize but felt deeply. The language of the letters shifted. Sometimes elegant, sometimes chaotic. Some were scrawled in crayon, others typed with precision. But they all shared a common thread cry for remembrance. A plea not to let the orphanage win. He spread them across the attic floor, like puzzle pieces, each one a fragment of memory, of trauma, of love, of loss. And in the center of it all, one final envelope, sealed with wax, his name carved, not written, into the paper. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a photo, black and white, of him and Eleanor, sitting together in the crib, smiling. Behind them, the shadows of other children, blurred and twisted, and written in small, perfect script beneath the image. They locked us in, but they never unlocked what they buried. He turned the photo over. A map, drawn by hand, of the orphanage. A room he'd never seen before. Tucked behind the boiler room. No door, just a wall. Marked with a red X. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he returned. The house no longer resisted him. The halls welcomed him like an old friend. He made his way to the basement once more, past the empty space where the crib had stood, past the mural that no longer existed. He found the boiler room. The wall was there solid brick, but he could feel it wasn't real. He touched it. It was warm, alive. He pressed both palms against it and whispered, "I remember." A low groan. The bricks pulsed once, then softened. He pushed. The wall gave way. And beyond it, darkness. But not the cold, empty kind. The living kind. And somewhere deep within it, the sound of a lullaby, faint, familiar, calling him in. The room that wasn't on the blueprints. The passage behind the wall was narrow, forcing him to duck and slide sideways as he moved forward. The air was thick and old, like time had forgotten how to move in here. His flashlight flickered, protesting the presence of something it couldn't comprehend. Still, he pressed on, heart thudding with a rhythm that wasn't entirely his own. It was as though the walls themselves were breathing with him, guiding him deeper. The floor sloped downward. The silence was thick, yet pregnant with presence. He passed faded murals on the brick walls, children, drawn in charcoal, their faces exaggerated, eyes hollow, reaching toward something unseen. In the far distance, the lullaby continued, impossibly distant and achingly close. When the corridor opened up, he found himself in a circular chamber with walls covered in mirrors. Each mirror was cracked, but not shattered, as if broken by intention rather than accident. He caught glimpses of himself in each one, but something was wrong. In some reflections, he was older. In others, younger. One mirror showed him asleep in a crib. Another showed him screaming, alone in the sunroom. And just one showed Eleanor. She stood still, watching him from the other side of the glass. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes carried all the weight of everything he had forgotten. He stepped forward, reaching for the mirror. The glass rippled like water beneath his fingertips. And suddenly, he wasn't in the chamber anymore. He was back in the orphanage, but it was daytime. Warm light streamed through the windows. The halls weren't empty or dusty. They were filled with laughter, soft footsteps, and the scent of oatmeal and powdered milk. It wasn't haunted now, it was alive. And he was standing in the middle of the common room, watching children play, nannies bustle, and a version of himself 5 years old sit quietly at the edge of the rug, clutching a book. Eleanor was beside him. She turned as if she felt his presence. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just held out her hand. He moved closer. He couldn't touch her, but she placed something on the floor in front of the child. A key, small, ornate, and impossibly old. The boy didn't notice. He was too lost in the pages. But the key remained, a tether between then and now. And in that moment, he understood. The room he stood in was never on the blueprints because it wasn't built. It was remembered. It was formed from trauma and guilt, from unfinished childhoods and broken promises. It was the collective grief of every child who had passed through those locked doors and never found a way back out, not in memory. This was their room, their sanctuary, their prison, and the only way to free them was to remember, not just the horrors, but the beauty, the music, the moments of light that still lived in the dark. The illusion dissolved. He was back in the chamber. The mirrors were no longer cracked. They were windows, now portals, to lives that had longed to be seen. And in the center of the room, where once was nothing, now stood the crib, no longer empty, no longer forgotten. It bore no child, just the key. The same key. He picked it up. It was warm. And when he held it, the mirrors began to fade, one by one, like memories finally set free. He left the chamber in silence. When he emerged into the daylight, the orphanage looked unchanged, still decaying, still alone. But it felt different, lighter. He locked the gate behind him for the last time, not to keep something in, but to let something go. He never spoke of the letters again, never told anyone about the map, a mirror, or the final room. But sometimes, in the quiet hours, when the world felt just a little too loud, he would hear a faint lullaby on the wind and smile because he remembered. And that was enough.